All right, so this is the review video for the Unit 1 test for world history. My webcam camera thing wasn't working, so I just have this video going on in the background as I go through the review. So I literally have the test in my hand, and I'm going through question by question, just hitting the main ideas that you need to know. All right, so first off, you need to know what prehistoric means. So we talked about this the first day. Prehistoric is before the invention of writing. History, written history, we have because it's written down, but prehistory is before the invention of writing, so we just have to go by artifacts and things like that we find. And then, you should know the 5 characteristics of a civilization. So in examples of each one and stuff like that. So obviously record keeping is obviously going to be keeping records. That's pretty obvious, writing down things. Advanced technology is going to be any kind of technology that helps humans out. Complex institutions is going to be like the education system, government, religion, things of that sort. And advanced cities are cities where you're going to see trade and different types of jobs and stuff like that. And then you need to know what people did in the Paleolithic time period. So the term Paleolithic refers to before farming, basically. So it's the Old Stone Age. So in this time, people were hunting and gathering, and so digging up plants. They had tools and stuff like that. They used, of course, for hunting. And then, of course, they're always moving around, so always had to find a new place to rest and stuff like that. And then, and of course, with the hunter-gatherer way of life, just keep in mind that obviously they didn't have permanent dwellings, so they weren't staying in one spot and staying there, the whole time. They were constantly moving around. Then the term Neolithic Revolution, that is the revolution when we went from hunting and gathering to food producing, and that's what enabled civilization to actually take root. So again, that's development of agriculture is the Neolithic Revolution, which is going to lead to civilization. Then the first type of farming that we see is slash and burn farming. So slash and burn farming, of course, is where they clear the land, burn it down, it puts nutrients into the soil, and then they're able to farm it. And then domestication of animals. Why did people domesticate animals soon after the Neolithic Revolution? It's simply really for meat. So they had a supply of meat available, and of course some animals did help them with farming, but others just provided a source of protein for them as well. All right, and there's also some matching on this test. So I'll just kind of hit some of the key terms you'll need to know for matching. So like an artisan, for example, an artisan is someone that's skilled in a particular area. So maybe making pottery, maybe a blacksmith or something like that would be an artisan. Bartering or barter. Bartering is before money came about, so that's when people traded goods. So I'll trade some camels for some wheat or something like that. The Bronze Age. During this time is when we see cities like Ur, in Sumeria. So the Bronze Age, of course, is when bronze was mainly used, and that's what we use for weapons and things like that. And it was one of the first metals to come about. Civilization, of course, is, advanced civilization, all the things we talked about, the characteristics of civilization. Keep in mind, again, it's the Neolithic Revolution and farming, the advent of farming and irrigation systems that allowed for food surpluses to help create civilization. And that's why, we have it. Cuneiform is an early form of writing, one of the first forms of writing, which it's a huge advancement for humans. So, after farming, writing is the next big thing. That's what allows us to organize. That's what allows us, to create civilization, have advanced technology, complex institutions, things like that, record keeping. Obviously, you got to be able to write to do all those things. And so cuneiform was the first system we saw really for that. And then, again, complex institutions. That's going to be like education system, religion, things like that help control and maintain society. Irrigation. So again, irrigation is what helped create the food surpluses. The more we irrigated, the more we were able to get water to our crops and then create an abundance of food to where people then could go and become artisans and do something other than farming. Scribes were people that actually knew how to write. So keep in mind, people, for most of history, only a small percentage of people could read and write. And those were the record keepers. Those were the ones that actually wrote and kept down everything. And usually in the social classes, they were really high up, one of the highest classes you could be. Because, they were the educated people that were keeping track of everything. And then specialization really just refers to the idea of people specializing in a certain skill. And so this division of labor and things like that, to where you have different people that are good at different things. And then a ziggurat, I mentioned that in the first presentation. That's that building, that big building I showed you, like in the city of Ur. That's where the priest was and ruled the cities from in Sumeria, like the city of Ur. That's also where they made the sacrifices and things like that and paid taxes and things of that sort. There's going to be some map questions. The map questions, I mean, honestly, if you can read a map and make some pretty simple generalizations, you should be good. For those that haven't taken geography, make sure you know latitude and longitude. You will need to be able to use some of that. So just basic map skills that you should know even if you haven't taken geography. And then there's a chart question. Again, just make sure you read everything carefully on the charts, and you should be fine on those. All right, then I told you, with the four river civilizations that you need to be able to compare and contrast them. So like looking at Egyptian and Mesopotamian societies, what they had in common or didn't have in common. Now, so women, for example, Mesopotamia, we talked about how they had, a good amount of freedom and stuff like that, and they could actually own property and do things of that sort. Of course, women were not running these societies whatsoever at all. And then in both societies, generally, it was just the boys that were educated. The women weren't educated nearly as much. So mainly boys in both Egypt and Mesopotamia were educated. And then Sargon of Akkad, we mentioned him as far as building the first empire on earth. And he did it basically by taking over northern and southern Mesopotamia. So remember I mentioned how those cities in Mesopotamia, like Ur, were city-states. And so that means each city had its own government, its own leader, military, and stuff like that. So Sargon, he took over all those cities and united them together into one kingdom, basically. And it didn't last very long, though. But he did it by uniting basically northern and southern Mesopotamia and all the cities in there. And then, again, comparing Egypt and Mesopotamia, if you look at their farmers, so why, like in Egypt, were the farmers more fortunate than those in Mesopotamia? And really, it's just simply because the Nile River, it was very predictable. They knew exactly when it was going to flood. It pretty much flooded the exact same time every year. It provided that rich silt for them to farm on. Whereas in Mesopotamia, you didn't know when it was going to flood. It could flood too much and not flood enough. It changed course, things like that. So it just wasn't as predictable and reliable as the Nile. And then looking at the pyramids in the Old Kingdom of Egypt, looking at that, whenever in history we look at, great works like that, it tells us a lot about their culture. And a lot about the kingdom itself. And so obviously to build something like the pyramids, you have to have a strong government, a strong leadership. You have to be highly organized. Obviously you need access to raw materials and goods and be able to get those things to where you're taking it. You had to be really good at math, so you had to have people that were advanced in math and engineering and things of that sort. So you had to have skilled workers, you had to have an organizational system that was highly advanced. You had to have strong leadership in the government, and then a ready supply of workers and a way to actually, get them to work motivation. So, I mean, the pyramids show alone how powerful Egypt was as a civilization, how advanced they were, and how skilled they were. And then going into the Indus River Valley, now this is what you did your ESPN chart on. And we talked about it some in class. Now, the unique thing about the Indus River Valley, the cities there I mentioned, is how they're on a grid system. So these were planned cities that were on a grid system that had plumbing and sewage systems. So they had basic toilets and stuff like that. They even had early showers. And so, I mean, this is 4,000 years ago, which is incredible. So it was incredibly advanced cities in that area. And then the Chinese writing system, I didn't mention this as much. It uses symbols, kind of like hieroglyphics in Egypt. But the main thing about Chinese writing system that's unique is that it's different than their spoken language. And so actually the Chinese writing system hasn't changed that much since the early years. And so people today can actually read a lot of ancient Chinese writing. So it's really changed very little and allowing them to communicate over time. All right, then I talked about also the mandate of heaven in China. So this, was the idea. This kind of led into the dynastic cycle. So a family would claim to have the mandate of heaven, which meant they have the right to rule. And then when they lost that, things started going bad. There was natural disasters and stuff that meant that they lost the mandate of heaven. And then a new ruler basically would take over. So basically allowed new people to take over whenever the earlier dynasty was declining or having issues and stuff like that in China. All right, some more matching, some more terms you need to know. Fertile Crescents, that's Mesopotamia. That's the area along the Tigris and Euphrates River. And then it curves around over along the Mediterranean. And obviously it's fertile. Pharaoh, of course, you know that is the leader of Egypt. Polytheism, of course, is belief in many gods. All right, then looking back at the Shang Dynasty in China, for example, you do need to know about like oracle bones. So they would basically throw these bones into a fire, and then the bones would crack, and then they would interpret those cracks and basically tell the ruler what he should do. So the Shang Dynasty did that. And then Hammurabi, of course, he created the Code of Laws, Hammurabi's Code, that united his empire together, one of the first code of laws that we see that helped that empire survive for a while. And then the silt that's left behind, like when the Nile floods, is called Loess, or Loess, and that's basically that highly fertile soil they can use to farm. The Indus Valley, of course, is in India, and that's where you see the planned cities and sewage systems that we talked about. Hieroglyphics, obviously, is the Egyptian writing system that uses symbols and pictures and stuff like that to represent an idea. A dynasty, of course, is a ruling family where rule is passed down through the family. And then pictographs, this is going to be kind of like Chinese writing, where you have a picture basically that stands for an idea, so some kind of symbol or something. All right, Indo-European migrants, I just mentioned them a little bit, and they were mainly herders, the people that migrated into Europe early on. And then the caste system in India, this developed, again, I just mentioned this a little bit at this point, but this developed within Hinduism, and this is, of course, the idea that you're born into a certain class and then you're stuck there until you get reincarnated in the next life. And so it's a very strict social class system. There's no moving up or down and stuff like that, so incredibly strict. All right, and then again, something else I just mentioned a little bit were the Phoenicians. They were in the Mediterranean area. They were seafarers, really advanced in that area, and so they were known for advanced trade, throughout the Mediterranean world, even maybe along the coast of Africa. And there's even some historians that think the Phoenicians made it over here to the Americas. So they're incredibly advanced in that. But their main contribution to us is the phonetic alphabet. So they came up with phonetic symbols, and the basis of the alphabet that we use today comes from the Phoenicians. All right, so the Hittites, I mentioned them just a little bit, and they were successful mainly from iron working. So you see the beginning of the Iron Age, basically, and so their weapons were stronger against the bronze weapons that were being used during the Bronze Age. So they kind of bring about the Iron Age. All right, so that's the end of this test. I also attached on Google Classroom, you'll see a link to a Quizlet that you can do to help review and get ready. But that is pretty much it. So I'd watch this video a couple times, go through the Quizlet, obviously look over your notes and things of that sort, and you should be good. Let me know if you have any questions, and come in tutoring if you need to.